Micah's guilty plea because the state of Buckeye failed to disclose to Micah or his trial attorney that Corey Abrams, the sole eyewitness to this crime, had recanted their testimony. This was undoubtedly. Oh, stop. Yeah, I was not going fast enough.
You can
Yeah.
keep going. You have like 15 seconds of like leeway time. So like when
Are
it
you sure?
yeah,
When
like,
you should stop, you can't really keep going, but you can just finish up your statement. Just finish it up real quick right there. Don't end abruptly.
Okay. At the end of this hearing, my co-counsel, London Hinkle, will put all of the pieces of the puzzle together and ask you to do what the law demands. Grant Micah Opus's motion to withdraw his guilty plea and correct the manifest injustice that took place on October 15th, 2019. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We'll now go ahead and do our opening right now. Do introductions.
get ready to stand up, boy.
You explain this a little bit.
From muted. All right. Good to go.
Me? No.
Sure.
Madison. Go. We're good to go.
Okay. Your Honors, I am Trent McCann. I'll be representing the prosecution. My co-counsel is one Preston Grooms.
Good morning, Your Honors.
We will be calling two witnesses to the stand. First, River Foley, played by Rachel Boland,
Yeah, it's a good morning, Your Honors.
and Kai Robbins, played by Madison Ritchie.
Good morning, Your Honors.
I like what I'm saying.
Your Honors, may it please the court and opposing counsel. Good evening. The case presented before you today is simply a matter of justice that was served and how it must be upheld. And as such, today, the state of Buckeye respectfully requests that the defendant's motion to withdraw their guilty plea be denied. The defense's case rests solely upon the reservations of an eyewitness whose original count was immaterial. They will operate under the false allegations that the defendant's due process rights were violated due to the withholding of the recanting of a witness statement. The truth of the matter is that the defendant's rights to due process were not violated because there was no trial, and therefore Brady and Giglio do not apply since they are meant to secure fair trials, not plea negotiations. Besides that, the defense's guilty plea waived their right to a fair trial. Therefore, the state of Buckeye had zero, again I say zero, obligation to turn over any evidence before the trial phase, and Brady and Giglio do not apply in this instance. The defense will claim that since the witness had reservations about their identification of the suspect, that it constituted enough change in the case that the already overwhelming amount of evidence against the defendant would not have been enough for a guilty verdict, and therefore the defendant would not have taken the plea deal. Today, the prosecution will tell you the truth in regards to how the defendant already had a copious amount of evidence pointing to their guilt without the witness statement even being factored in. The true story behind today's case goes as follows. On the chilly fall night of August 31st, 2019, the victim, Hamea Robbins, was brutally murdered by one Micah Opus. There was a plethora of evidence placing him there that night and plenty of motive. Knowing this and being aware of his guilt, Opus, with the advice of his attorney, knowingly and voluntarily agreed to a plea deal. A plea deal in which Brady and Giglio does not apply to. A plea deal in which Opus was fully aware of the plethora of material evidence against him. Again, I add how the prosecution had given all the material evidence over to the defense. It had no obligation to give it in the first place, nor any obligation to turn over any immaterial evidence. Despite what the defense may say, Micah was no angel. He had a history of illegal activity and bad behavior across the board. Your Honors, first we will be bringing Detective River Foley to the stand. She will give her insight in regards to the physical evidence found at the crime scene and how it clearly points to Micah Opus's guilt. Experienced Detective Foley worked on the original trial and was put in a situation that was not her fault at all, in which she had to get results within a 10-day constraint. Detective Foley will also be showing us that one eyewitness's reservations would not have changed the case against the defendant enough to be material under Brady or Giglio, with which don't apply to begin with. After the crucial testimony of Detective River Foley, we will bring in the mother of Hamea, Kai Robbins, to the stand. Kai has an extensive history with the defendant and will give crucial insight to the defendant's troubled past. She will also give the full story of what happened the night of the murder. In that regard, she will show how Micah had shown motive for the murder and how she learned of the threats that he made against Hamea before he killed her. There is one irrefutable fact that will be ensured today. The evidence against the defendant, not even including the witness statement, clearly points to their guilt. Your Honor, the prosecution again respectfully requests that the defense's motion be denied.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll go ahead. If the defense is ready to present their witnesses at this time, they may go ahead. Actually, I'll stick out.
You say we could call a witness?
Oh, yeah, you guys can go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
speak up. I'm further away from the mic. Sorry.
All right, at this time, the defense would like to call Charlie Nguyen to the stand, and then, okay. Yep. Good evening. Could you please state your first and last name for the court, spelling the last?
Hi, my name's Charlie Nguyen. The last is spelled Nguyen.
Thank you, Miss Nguyen. What do you do for a living?
Currently, I am a licensed private investigator and sole proprietor of Nguyen Investigations.
And how long have you been a private investigator?
The past 10 years.
And how many cases have you worked on as a private investigator?
Over 100.
Did you do anything before you were a private investigator?
Yes, actually. I was a police officer for the Buckeye Police Department.
Eh.
I eventually ended my career as a certified evidence technician.
And what position did you hold when you first started working at the Buckeye Police Department?
I was a patrol officer.
Okay, did you hold any other positions?
Yes, I worked my way up to detective and then to certified evidence technician.
Was there any training required to become a certified evidence technician?
Yes, actually, we took multiple seminars on basic criminal investigations, evidence seminars, spacing, and DNA and fingerprint analysis.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nguyen. What were your responsibilities as an evidence technician?
When a crime scene is reported, our job was to go collect and analyze the evidence that we find there, for the detectives.
And would you say that these trainings and seminars kept you up to date with cases that you see today?
Yes, actually. Not a lot has changed, and pretty much, I've learned everything that I know from those seminars.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Your Honors, at this time, I would like to tender Ms. Nguyen as an expert in evidence analysis, evidence collection, and criminal investigation.
No objections.
All right, thank you. Ms. Nguyen, other than knowledge, what else did you learn from your training?
We learned the how to interview witnesses and suspects, the importance of keeping an open mind, and following in on tips as soon as they come in.
And Ms. Nguyen, how were you introduced to this case?
I was hired by Freddie Sticks to review all the evidence disclosed by the prosecution and talk to the witnesses that had been identified.
As soon as you were introduced, were there any resources available for you to review?
Yes, actually, the discovery.
And what did you gather from the discovery?
I learned of all the evidence that was collected in this case. There was a partial fingerprint on Jamea's glasses, a footprint found near the crime scene, an eyewitness named Corey Abrams, multiple posts by Micah, and then multiple text messages from Micah to Jamea.
Were you able to review the fingerprint found at the crime scene?
I did.
And how many points of similarity did it have?
7 out of 150.
Objection or lack of foundation. We haven't really established what points of foundation are. I'm sorry, points of similarity are.
Well, I guess I'd say may I respond, but we didn't need to lay any further foundation. We discussed that there was a fingerprint found, and Ms. Nguyen can testify as she is an expert and she can explain what points of similarity are when it comes to a fingerprint.
My response is, while I'm sure Ms. Nguyen's qualified to speak on that matter, we haven't really, there's been no foundation laid for what exactly points of similarity are and how they're relevant to this fingerprint. I think there needs to be more foundation in that circumstance. Someone can rule. You can respond.
I'll just sustain it. I'll go ahead and touch on some more.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's talk more about the fingerprint. What did this fingerprint evidence look like as soon as you reviewed it?
As soon as I reviewed it, actually, there was a photo of it. It showed all the points that were found on the fingerprint. that matched that could be found. There's just 150 to a fingerprint. From this partial print, we only found 7 of them.
And 7 points, what do you mean by those 7 points?
So in a fingerprint, there's 150 total. There's only a partial fingerprint found at the crime scene, and from that partial print, we could only gather 7 of the same 150.
So points of similarity, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. How many, in your expert opinion, are required to confirm a match?
In the state of Buckeye, it's always been 12.
Okay, thank you. What type of fingerprint does Micah have?
He has an arch fingerprint.
And is this an uncommon type of fingerprint?
It's the most uncommon type of fingerprint. Only 5% of people in the world have it, and 7 in Buckeye.
And in your experience and training, does that uncommon fingerprint make up for the 5 points of similarity that we're missing?
Leading the witness.
Your Honors, I am not leading the witness. I was just simply asking a question based on her expertise and knowledge.
Well, I'm not disputing that you're allowed to ask a question based on her expertise and knowledge, but you're specifically asking her about leading her to answer specifically and doubting the evidence in your question instead of letting the witness do that.
Should we say, may I respond? I don't know.
If there was a judge, yeah, you say, may I respond?
Yeah, I know. Okay.
You can go on. I'm just going to tell you that in trial, they'll probably object to leading there. So just be prepared for that.
Did anything else about the fingerprint stand out to you?
Can you say the question again? Sorry.
Yes. Did anything else about the fingerprint stand out to you?
Yes, actually, it was an arch fingerprint, which is the rarest type of fingerprint. Only 5% of people in the world have it, but 7% in Buckeye.
And was there anything else missing from this piece of information?
Yes, actually. When I was a police officer, we always used a comparison methodology called ACE-V. It's an acronym. It stands for Analyze, Compare, Evaluate, Verify. It is the best way to review the fingerprint in this case. And I found that they didn't actually follow the V, which is the verify. So they did not get a second person to actually verify that the fingerprint was a match to Micah. Arguably, it's the most important step. It's the only thing that really shows that the fingerprint is a match.
In your experience in training, because it was not verified by a second examiner, what would this mean for this piece of evidence?
I would rule it to be unreliable.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Were you able to review any of the other evidence after the fingerprint?
Yes, after the fingerprint, I reviewed the footprint found at the crime scene.
And what did that evidence introduce to you?
It showed that they said it was a size 9 Converse. It was made by oil in the parking lot near where Hamea was murdered.
Do you know what size shoe this was?
They said it was a size 9, but after further reviewing the report, there was no way to really tell what size it was, because in this report you have to to analyze this evidence and actually preserve it, you have to take a picture of it. You're supposed to take it at 90 degrees to where it was found, and there was nothing on the police report that said that it was actually taken at a 90-degree angle.
And based on your experience and just from what you've seen so far through your career, would this evidence be incriminating?
I would say that it wasn't.
Okay, you also mentioned that there were nylon fibers. Were you able to review those?
I did, yeah.
And what did you find?
I found that they were blue nylon fibers, and they did match Micah Opus's jacket. However, they could have matched a number of other things that are made today. Yeah.
And what could have possibly transferred the nylon fibers?
Any sort of contact with Hamea Robbins while she was wearing the same clothes she wore that night.
And could you give an example to the court of what could possibly transfer this nylon fiber?
A hug, maybe.
Okay, and when exactly did the evidence get placed at the crime scene?
I don't know. There's no way to really tell.
Okay, and was there any other evidence for the case?
Yes, actually, there was an eyewitness named Corey Abrams.
Did you try to contact Corey Abrams?
Yes, I called Corey Abrams and left a voicemail since he didn't pick up.
Were you able to, so at any point in time in your investigation, were you able to talk with Corey Abrams?
No, Corey never called me back.
And why didn't you make a bigger effort to talk with Corey Abrams?
Well, it's been shown that eyewitnesses can be very unreliable. And then I also found out that 10 days had passed before Corey was talked to, and adding that to a 5-pack lineup being showed to Corey after the 10 days, it just seemed that the eyewitness would be very unreliable.
Well, why is it important to get witness testimonies quickly?
So basically just the mind, after you see someone for briefly from a distance running away at a traumatic experience, your mind tends to forget things.
Now, you also said that Corey Abrams was shown a 5-photo lineup.
Yes, a 5-photo lineup is where the police puts 5 pictures in front of an eyewitness, asking them to choose one who is the person they saw actually do the crime. 1 is the suspect, and 4 are other people who look like the suspect.
And based on your expertise, what is your opinion on 5-photo lineups?
They've also been proven to be very unreliable. They can also influence an eyewitness into choosing someone who doesn't look the same as the person they saw that night, because subconsciously they would want to choose someone and satisfy the police.
And could that have affected this case regarding Corey Abrams?
Yes.
And based on your experience, do you think all of the evidence was reliable?
No, I don't think anything that the police found was very reliable at all.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. Oh, I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh yeah, I noticed that. It's fine. So Ms. Nguyen, you currently work as a private investigator for your own firm, correct?
Yes.
And your previous job in the field of criminal investigation was with the Buckeye Police Department. That's right?
Yes, that's the state police department.
Okay. And while you have lengthy experience in this field, your only occupations have been with the Buckeye Police Department and Nguyen Investigations, right?
Yes.
And it has been almost 10 years since you've actually worked as a law enforcement officer, hasn't it?
Yes.
And you became a certified evidence technician, which you mentioned on direct, but with the Buckeye Police Department, correct?
Yes.
And in that role, you only handle evidence under the jurisdiction of the Buckeye Police Department, right?
Yes.
So the criminal investigation into Hamea's murder was conducted by the Harmony Police Department and Detective River Foley, correct?
Yes.
And you've never worked for the Harmony Police Department, have you?
No, but the Harmony Police Department is a town police department, and I worked for the state.
But you've never worked. You don't have any familiarity with the specific procedures of the Harmony Police Department, do you?
Objection. Ms. Nguyen is a licensed private investigator, obviously does not work for a specific police department, but was hired on by Micah Opus's trial attorney, Freddie Sykes.
What exactly is your objection?
I don't know.
The witness,
I know there's really not a specific one, but like
answer that if they feel like it, but I don't know what your objection is.
Yeah, you're right. I don't have one, but like
you can object to relevance.
Just keep going. Yeah, relevance, I guess, but
my response would be I'm just simply establishing how much familiarity this witness has with the specific criminal investigation, despite their expertise in general. Their specific expertise is in question here.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, so we'll just retrack here. You have no specific familiarity with the procedures of the Harmony Police Department, do you?
No.
Okay. You also have no indication that any of the personnel who conducted the actual criminal investigation were underqualified or underperformed, do you?
Objection, speculation. Ms. Nguyen would not be able to testify to that as she would have no idea how anyone else conducted their investigation.
May I respond? That's exactly my question. I'm trying to establish if they did have no knowledge of that.
May I respond?
Yes.
I understand what your question is, but it would still cause speculation from Ms. Nguyen because she has no idea how anyone else conducted their investigation. She can't testify to that.
Okay. My response would be, well, I'm just trying to establish that and put that into the record. But we'll move on. Well, assuming you agree to that, then I'll just move on. You discussed the ACE-V technique earlier, and in this circumstance, a trained and qualified individual completed the analysis, comparison, and evaluation stages of that technique, didn't they?
Yes, but apparently not two.
What do you mean by not two?
In ACE-V, the last step, the verification step, you must have
Oh.
2 examiners.
Okay, I was confused what you meant by that. So not 2 examiners. Okay. But the original analysis and evaluation of the print, despite your qualms with it, it did conclude that it belonged to Micah Opus A, didn't it?
Yes, but I only had 7 points.
But the trained and qualified examiner determined it belonged to Micah Opus A, even though you don't agree with that analysis. That's what it determined, right?
The only way to really certify that at its most effectiveness would be with 2 examiners, and that's not what happened with this case.
But okay. And you stated that only a very small portion of the Buckeye population even has the same fingerprint type as Micah, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that I'm now presenting a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit E. Just a moment here. Sorry, it has to reload. That's fine. Okay. So here's Exhibit E. So this is a photograph of the shoe print collected from the murder scene, right?
Yes.
And you said that you can't determine if the proper steps were followed in collecting the shoe print. Didn't you say that?
Yeah.
But you don't have any evidence that it was done improperly, do you?
Well, we don't have any evidence that says it was done properly.
Well, investigation was conducted by a qualified police department, wasn't it?
Yes, but you still have to verify that all the steps were taken.
Well, the Harmony Police Department conducted this investigation. I'm sure that they made sure that they collected the shoe print right, wouldn't they have?
And where does it say that?
No, I'm just asking, in your professional opinion, did the Buckeye Police Department or any police department, your experience, did you ever collect evidence improperly?
Me? No.
But okay. So what you're saying is it's unlikely that it was collected improperly, right?
There's no way to tell.
Continuing, Micah does indeed wear shoes that are consistent with that shoe print, doesn't he?
Can you repeat the question?
Micah does indeed wear shoes that are consistent with that shoe print, doesn't he?
He wears Converse.
That are consistent with that shoe print, right?
No way to tell.
Well, however, that Micah wears size 9 Converse shoes, and that analysis shows that that's a size 9 Converse shoe, right?
Where does it confirm that it's a size 9 shoe?
The analysis conducted by the Harmony Police Department and the discovery that you said to have reviewed, right?
And where is that proven to be reliable?
I'm not asking if it was proven to be reliable in your independent investigation, but I'm saying, according to the Harmony Police Department, is consistent with Micah Opus A's shoe, right?
According to the Harmony Police Department.
Continuing, blue fibers consistent with Micah's clothing were also collected, right?
Yes.
And, So just to be clear, to review, according to the Harmony Police Department, a shoe print consistent with Micah's shoes, a fingerprint matching Micah Opus A's fingerprint, and fibers.
Objection, compound question.
Okay, I'll review.
I'll split it up here.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, a fingerprint similar to Micah was found at the scene, right?
That's what the Harmony Police Department said.
And a shoe print consistent with Micah's shoes was found at the scene, correct?
According to Harmony.
And fibers consistent with Micah's clothing were also found on Hamea's body, weren't they?
Yeah.
And additionally, as far as you know, no evidence tying any other individual to the scene of Hamea's murder has been found, has it?
Well, they didn't really make an effort to find anybody else.
Do you have any evidence of that? Continuing, I'll ask it.
Yeah,
I'll ask that
sorry.
again. You don't have any evidence that they didn't. Let me rephrase here. All the evidence in the discovery pointed to Micah Opusay and no one else, right?
Yes.
And moving on to the eyewitness identification. You weren't present when Corey Abrams made his identification of Micah Opusay, were you?
No.
And is it true that only 10 days after the murder, Corey Abrams said that Micah Opusay was the individual?
Objection, hearsay. And also, this goes outside. If you're bringing up Corey Abrams right now, Corey Abrams is not. Well, Corey Abrams is present, but you're not questioning Corey Abrams, so Ms. Nguyen cannot testify as to something that Corey Abrams has said.
May I respond? This is not considered hearsay because Corey Abrams will be able to be cross-examined on what they've said, so I can ask anything that Corey Abrams said.
Under what rule? Under what exception of hearsay rule would that be?
It's not an exception to the hearsay rule. It isn't hearsay because if he can be cross-examined on his statement, it's not hearsay because the only reason it would be hearsay if it was an out-of-court statement. But we'll be able to cross Corey Abrams, and you'll be able to have Corey Abrams confirm. I can get the rule here for you here.
Okay, well, but my objection still stands because Ms. Nguyen can't testify as to something Corey Abrams said. As she already stated in her statement, she didn't even ever speak with Corey Abrams. So I guess lack of personal knowledge would be my objection. On top of hearsay.
She's an expert on the evidence of this case, and she reviewed the discovery report, so she should be able to testify what was in that report.
May I respond?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so she can testify as to the evidence, but she's not an expert on something that another witness said. And Corey Abrams, she still cannot testify to an out-of-court statement that Corey Abrams said because that's not what she's an expert under.
My response is the eyewitness testimony is evidence, and if we're going to have her testify about it on direct examination, I believe I should be able to cross-examine what she said on it. That's would only be fair under the Constitution of the United States.
Okay, you can continue.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be ruthless here. I'm just trying to practice.
You're fine.
My coach is dying in the corner. Sorry about that. Where was I at? So going on, so you believe that Corey Abrams' testimony was unreliable, right?
Yes.
And you said you only made one attempt to contact Corey Abrams, right?
Yeah, that's all I really needed to do.
But you're attempting to exonerate Micah Opusay, right?
Based on the evidence, that's what I was.
If you have doubts about a certain piece of evidence, why weren't you more adamant in trying to track down that the key witness in this case? If you had doubts about that evidence.
Well, I had doubts about the eyewitness because first,
But you only tried to contact them once.
Yes, because there's
Okay.
so many things that could be unreliable about this eyewitness.
And you have no evidence that the photo lineup that was conducted by River Foley was flawed, do you?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, someone stopped.
You have no evidence that the photo lineup conducted by experienced detective River Foley was flawed, do you?
No.
And so one last thing. You're being compensated by the defense for your testimony here today, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you're being paid double your normal fee to be involved with this case.
Objection, relevance. That has nothing to do with the evidence that you were just talking about.
May I respond, Your Honor? This is clearly evidence that would question the credibility of the witness. Their compensation establishes their possible bias in this case.
May I respond?
Yes, you may.
How much Ms. Nguyen is being paid by the defense has nothing to do with evidence at all, and it's not even evidence in itself.
I'm not questioning the evidence with this.
You just said that it was evidence. It's how much Miss Nguyen is being paid is not evidence.
I'm questioning the credibility of the witness that you called, not the evidence itself. Porter,
Okay,
we have our
continue.
coach here. He can make a ruling. Sustained or overruled. You were out. You walked out for 5 seconds. We'll just finish. It's my last question. It might be overruled. It might not. But in fact, you're being paid double your normal fee to be involved with this case and disparage the evidence today, right?
Well, there was a lot of evidence in this case, and also it was 5 days before the trial.
That didn't answer my question. Are you being paid double? You're being paid double your normal fee to testify today, right?
I was.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor. You're gonna redirect?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I actually didn't write any, so, but I'll come up with something on the fly.
Do it. Yeah. Well, I should have said the fifth amendment.
Now, Miss Nguyen, let's go ahead and talk about that shoe print again. So, through your experience and your training, was it easy for you to conclude if this piece of evidence was conducted properly?
Objection, Your Honor, leading the witness.
Yeah, it was. I was not even thinking about redirect. Ms. Nguyen, could you please refresh the court's memory on why you did not think that this shoe print evidence was reliable?
Well, like I said, to preserve this evidence for later analysis, you must take a picture of it. So to actually properly take a picture and document this evidence, you have to take a picture at a 90-degree angle. And in the police report, there's nothing that says that it was actually taken at a 90-degree angle, determining its actual size.
And Ms. Nguyen, could you please further explain why you were paid double the normal fee to be here today, even though it is not relevant to this case whatsoever?
Well, it was 5 days before the trial date, and also there was just a ton of evidence in this case to just review and talk to everybody in this case.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Yes, I will recross. Give me just a second. Sorry, I went too far. Where's Miss Charlie Nguyen's statement? That's over. Okay. Okay. So looking at the shoe print, which I presented earlier, it looks like it was taken at a 90-degree angle, doesn't it? Just in your professional opinion.
I don't really need to say how it looks. I need actual evidence that it was taken at 90-degree angle.
Well, if you want actual evidence, in your statement you say that the investigating police department will usually
Objection outside the scope of redirect.
May I respond? I'm going to ask about the shoe print, specifically what you questioned on redirect.
But you are digging into something Ms. Nguyen said in her statement that goes along with that, and that's not anything that I brought out in redirect.
Okay, well, I'll remove the from in your statement part. I'll rephrase
Okay.
here.
Thank you.
Generally, when investigating a shoe print, the investigating police department will lift the shoe print with a gelatin lifter, right?
Yes.
So the Harmony Police Department has an actual physical recreation of that shoe print, don't they?
Yes.
So if they have that physical recreation, it's fair to say they probably can determine what size the shoe is, correct?
Objection, speculation. Ms. Nguyen has already stated that she does not know the exact size of the shoe print because when gathering this evidence, it was not conducted properly, or if it was, she does not know. And she has stated already, it has been asked and answered, that she does not know if this evidence was gathered properly.
My response is I'm simply if Ms. Nguyen is an expert, as you admit her, she can use her expert opinion to testify before this court about the process that was used in collecting the evidence, which would add more credibility to it, which is what I'm trying to do.
And you are still asking Miss Nguyen to give a specific answer, which she already said that she cannot give a specific answer.
I'm not asking her if it's a size 9 shoe print in her opinion, but whether the Harmony Police Department properly could have determined that from their process.
Well, then that would be lack of personal knowledge, because how would she know if she doesn't work for the Harmony Police Department, as you stated in your cross?
I'll rephrase the general question. If a police department was to lift the shoe print with a gelatin lifter, they could likely determine what size the shoe print was, right?
Likely, but I did not.
No further question, John.
All right, you guys can go ahead.
You call your second witness.
Oh yeah. Who is ours? Okay, at this time, the defense would like to call Corey Abrams to the stand.
Can you guys hear me all right? I'm gonna hope so. We're gonna go on.
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Good evening, Miss Abrams. Could you please state your first and last name for the court and spell your last?
Good evening, Your Honors. My name is Corey Abrams, spelled A-B-R-A-M-S.
How long have you lived in Harmony?
I've lived in Harmony for the past 22 years. I moved here when I was a kid.
What is your occupation?
I own a food truck parked in the corner of First and Green.
Have you always owned a food truck?
It wasn't my intentional plan to become a food truck owner. I majored at Harmony Community College in political science, and one summer I went down to Israel and studied, and you could say their food scene changed my life. I tried to recreate the delicious food I ate after realizing that no food trucks in Harmony created Israeli food, and one thing led to another. I perfected my menu. I bought a truck off Craigslist, and here we are.
Miss Abrams, how did you become involved in this case?
I was an eyewitness to this case on August 31st when I saw a person running away from my food truck with a gun.
What was the first strange thing that you had noticed that night?
The first thing I noticed was it was really weird. At around 8:30 p.m. I heard a loud noise that sounded like gunshots, but I originally thought it was just a truck backfiring.
And what did you notice after you heard this loud noise?
After I realized that I heard this loud noise, it startled me enough, and I looked out the window and I saw a person running away with a gun. So when I realized that the person had a gun, I realized that it was gunshots I heard and not a truck backfiring. So I immediately went to my phone and called 911.
About how far away would you say this person was from your location?
About 20 yards from my truck.
And did you get a good look at this person?
They were running the person I saw was running parallel to my truck. And so I mostly got a side profile, but I yelled, "Hey, what's going on?" And so they looked at my way for excuse me. They looked my way for about a minute, and so I think I got a pretty good look.
Did you try to get a closer look or follow this person?
I realized that the person running away had a gun, so I wasn't going to follow them and put myself at risk.
What did you do after you realized you had heard gunshots?
I immediately called 911.
Did any officers ever show up?
Detective Foley came and talked to me shortly after I called.
And when did River Foley contact you?
Detective River Foley contacted me. I gave him my number and told him what happened that night. And later they contacted me on September 2nd to come in for a 5-photo lineup.
And did you go down to do that 5-photo lineup?
I didn't immediately go down to do the 5-photo lineup that Detective Foley asked me to do. I was at a food truck convention in Chicago all week, and so I couldn't immediately go, but it ended on September 9th, and I got back at September 10th, and I immediately went right after.
How was the convention?
It was great. I went down with a couple other food truck owners, and I won a mini fridge that I've had my eyes on.
Could you repeat that, please?
Relevance, that's my objection.
Huh? Sorry.
Oh, relevance. I don't know if you can hear.
Relevance, okay. Your Honors, just trying to get a background on why witness decided they wanted to stay down at the convention instead of coming back to do this 5 photo lineup.
Okay. You go. You can go and continue with it. Just be prepared for that real trial.
Yeah. Sorry. How many days had passed before you had went down to the station?
About 10 days.
What did the interview with Detective Foley consist of?
Detective Foley called me down to do a 5 photo lineup, and he had me look at 5 similar-looking people in photos and to see if I could identify the person I saw running away on August 31st.
And did you identify anybody?
I chose one picture that was a little bit brighter than the others, but stood out the most to me.
Were you confident you had identified the right person?
I wasn't confident about my choice in identification. I wasn't 100% sure, but I made sure I let Detective River Foley know.
Did Detective Foley mention anything else before you had left the station?
He thanked me for coming in and identifying the picture. He reassured me I had a good memory, and right before I left, he told me the person I identified's name was Micah Opuse.
Wait, so Detective Foley told you the name of who you had identified?
Yes, that's correct.
Leading the objection or leading the witness.
Your Honors, it is. Huh? Okay. It is quite uncommon for a detective to tell a witness the name of the person they had identified in a 5 photo lineup.
My response is it doesn't matter how uncommon it is, you're still suggesting to the witness that it is uncommon, and the witness needs to testify themselves about what happened that night or during that identification.
Okay. I'm going to continue. I'm really bad at this whole objection thing, so I'm just
Okay.
going to say you're right.
I would just, if I were you, I would just say I'm simply, because the witness is unsure of how, because the witness is unsure about the entire process, I'm simply helping the witness recount their events of the night or something like that, or the identification. I don't know why I keep saying night, but that's what I'd say. You can continue.
Thank you. Okay. What was the next thing you had heard about the homicide?
The next thing I heard was about 2 days later. I didn't really actually hear anything, but I grew impatient about not hearing anything. Wait. Sorry, can you ask the question again?
Yeah, absolutely. What was the next thing you had heard about the homicide?
I'm sorry, what was right before that?
Your interview with Detective Foley.
Okay. Right after my interview with Detective Foley, I didn't get in contact with Detective Foley again. But I grew impatient 2 days after, and I googled the number of the Cardinal County prosecutor's office and asked why I hadn't heard it. Oh my goodness. Okay. Wait a second. It's not it. Wait a second. I'm wrong. Wait a second. Wait. Wait. Wait.
Would you like me to rephrase the question?
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. What happened after your interview with Detective Foley?
Okay, there we go. I know what I did. Okay. After my interview with Detective Foley, I didn't really hear much about it afterwards, and I decided to let it go for a bit. After about a month went by, um after about a month went by, I was working on the exterior of my truck, and I was trying to relax and watch some TV, and I sat down on the couch and turned on the TV, and I saw on the news about Micah Opuse in a recent murder case in downtown Harmony. There I go.
And what did you think when you saw Micah on TV?
Once I saw Micah on TV, my heart sank. I didn't I realized that I didn't see Micah that night. The person I saw was much taller and had a much bigger build.
And was there any specific reason why you had thought you recognized Micah?
Now, looking back on it now, the real reason why I recognized Micah when when I chose him on the 5 photo lineup was because I saw them ordering at a food truck next to me earlier that day.
And what did you do after realizing that Micah wasn't the correct person?
After realizing that I wrongly identified Micah as the person I saw, I immediately went to my phone and called 911.
And did you hear anything else about this case?
I didn't hear much about this case, but I did grow impatient after 2 days. And so I Googled and I'd never heard anything. So I Googled the Cardinal County Prosecutor's Office and got in touch with the law clerk at the front desk and asked why I hadn't heard anything about my change of heart after I told Detective Foley that I was wrong about Micah. I and she didn't really answer my question. I asked her after I asked her, she said she would put a note into the prosecutor's file and he would look at it. But he never really got back to me and I never heard from them again.
Why did you care so much about letting somebody know about your mistake?
I really wanted to fix this case. After I realized that it was my fault that I wrongly identified seeing someone, I it really it really stuck with me and I thought that it was really injustice for two people, not just Micah, who is wrongly convicted of murdering someone, but also the victim's murderer, who is running free while the victim is not getting justice.
After you contacted the law clerk, what happened next?
Ask it again. Sorry.
Yeah. After you contacted the law clerk, what happened next?
I didn't hear anything after the law clerk contacted me, so I it was I really didn't hear anything and I dropped it finally. But I'm sorry, I answered that already.
No, you're good, you're good.
Okay.
Did you make any final attempts to overturn this case?
My final attempt was after okay. One more time and I got it. I got it this time. Okay.
Did you make any final attempts to overturn this case?
I did make one final attempt to do the best thing for this case and help Micah. I finally grew impatient and I was still feeling uneasy about the whole thing. So I wrote a letter to Micah's lawyer explaining the whole situation, and I never heard from them, but that was my final attempt.
Nothing further.
Okay.
So on the night of Hamea's murder, you heard gunshots in the parking lot behind your truck,
Yes,
correct? But it's true, you first thought it was simply a truck backfiring, right? And then after that, though, you saw a person with a gun fleeing, and you called 911,
Immediately,
right?
yes.
So at this point, you were aware there was a good chance that someone had been seriously injured, right?
Sorry, ask the question again.
Well, since you had heard gunshots and saw someone with a gun running, at this point you were probably aware that there was a good chance that someone had been seriously injured, correct?
I was pretty surprised when I found out Micah was a
Sorry, objection.
sorry.
Lack of personal evidence.
What could you clarify?
Sorry. Lack of personal knowledge, my bad.
I'm simply asking what the witness thought at that time in order to understand their account of the night. So they have personal knowledge of what they saw, at least I assume they do.
Okay. I must have misinterpreted your question. Continue.
I'll re-ask you here. So at this point, you were aware that there was a good chance that someone had been shot and seriously injured, right?
I wasn't really aware of it at the time. I was pretty shocked when I saw Micah on the TV for a murder case in Harmony.
So, considering you heard gunshots and called 911, what did you do next while waiting for the police?
I finished scrubbing down my grill.
So you had heard gunshots and saw someone walking away in possession of a gun
but your first instinct was to go clean your grill. Is that correct?
No, I was already in the middle of it, and you really do have to clean it while it's still warm, or I could have lost more business in this. But I had to wait for the police, and they were carrying a gun, so I clearly wasn't going to follow them.
So you knew at this point there were gunshots fired, and you saw someone. Sorry, I'll continue. Sorry, that's the wrong question. In fact, after the police left that night, you didn't even think that what you had seen was really important, did you?
I didn't really think too much more of it after talking to Detective Foley.
So, in your signed affidavit that you submitted before this trial, when you were done talking to the police, you stated, "I just finished cleaning up and didn't think about it too much more." Right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, from my reading into that, it's not clear that you were even concerned or showed any cognizance on the night of James Robin's murder, right?
I didn't really think it was a murder scene, so no. Well, yes, that's correct. Sorry.
But you want justice for James Robin's murder now, right?
Now that I know it's a murder case now, yes, I do.
Sorry, I don't cross this witness, so I just have to see what I want to ask. Sorry.
No, you're good.
So when Detective River Foley brought you in, you noted that one of the pictures looked brighter than the other, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you then selected the photo of Micah Opusay, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you claim that Detective Foley acted relieved when you picked Micah, right?
That is how he acted to me. Yes, that's correct.
But he didn't say anything specific that indicated that, did he?
He was just watching me closely, but I don't think he said anything, no.
And he didn't make any specific gestures that would indicate that, did he?
He did reassure me that I had a good memory. I know that.
But he didn't say anything specific that led you to believe that you had picked the right choice, right?
Sorry, can you ask that again?
He didn't say anything specific that led you to believe you made the right choice. You would just identify the person you saw, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it was almost a month later before you changed your mind about what you saw that night, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
And you changed it because of a produced media segment that you saw, right?
I saw Mike Opusay in broad daylight, and it looked totally different than the picture when I identified him. So, yes.
However, you stated earlier that the picture you saw was brighter. So the original picture you saw was bright too, wasn't it?
Could you rephrase that?
What I'm asking is, you said you saw him walking around in broad daylight, but in the original photo lineup, the picture you saw, you said was bright at that time too. So the lighting didn't make much of a difference, did it?
Well, when I saw him walking down the street, I saw him moving as well. So that's the light that I saw, and it looked totally different from the picture.
However, that was a produced media segment and not a official police investigation photo lineup, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And in your statement, you claim to be living in constant anguish, right?
Yes, that's correct. I had to move places from my truck.
And you stated that you want to protect Micah from punishment, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
However, despite this, you waited an entire year before contacting Micah's attorney about this, didn't you?
Yes, that's correct.
And you stated on direct that you got impatient after 2 days of waiting originally, but again, you went on to wait an entire year after Micah was sent to prison, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, considering no further questions.
Yep. Okay, so let's retouch on your interview with Detective Foley. So he had you look at the photo lineup, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, yeah. My bad.
That was leading.
Yeah.
Objection.
That was.
Leading.
Yeah. Would you mind retelling the court how Detective Foley conducted this lineup?
Yes.
Or this interview, my bad.
Sorry, say it one more time. Sorry.
Yes. Would you mind retelling the court how Detective Foley conducted this interview?
Detective Foley gave me 5 photos to look at that all looked relatively similar and tried to get me to identify the person, to see if I could identify the person I saw on August 31st running away from parallel to my truck.
And could you describe what you had seen in this photo lineup?
Even though all of the pictures looked roughly similar, similar, there was one picture that was like brighter than the others and looked the most familiar to me.
Okay. And did you identify anybody?
I did identify the picture that was brightest and looked the most similar to me.
Was there any other reason why you identified this photo?
Oh,
Objection or leading the witness.
Hmm?
Objection or leading the witness.
How is that leading? I asked. I didn't lead. Hold on. I've got to think of how to use words. Yeah. I said, was there any other reason why she thought that? I didn't say she did. I'm asking if she did.
Well, you're doubting the evidence in your question instead of you're doubting her identification in your question instead of letting the witness tell you if she doubted her identification.
I'll rephrase it. Were you confident in your selection of this picture?
I wasn't really confident in my selection, but I did make sure I let Detective Foley know, just in case.
Okay. Was there any specific reason why you weren't so confident in this selection?
Sorry, ask it one more time.
Yeah. Was there any specific reason why you weren't confident in this selection?
I wasn't really confident in this because they all looked relatively similar, and I didn't really know. I didn't. Sorry. Okay. There wasn't. There was while I looked at that picture, it was like. Yeah, it was like River Foley was looking at me, and it made me think that it was him, but I didn't really think it was him, but it did look the most similar. Oh my god.
Okay. I'm not sure how to word what I want to get out, so nothing further, I guess.
Yeah.
So the photo lineup in question with Detective River Foley happened only 10 days after the murder, right?
Yes, sure.
And just to recall, that murder happened over a year ago, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So only 10 days after the murder, you spoke with Detective Foley and picked the person you believed to be the perpetrator of the crime, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And Detective Foley never told you even who any of those people in that photo lineup were, did he?
He did. He did after I identified my one picture, Micah Opuse.
But before you made your identification, you knew nothing about those people. You just picked the person that most resembled the person who killed Hameo Robbins, right?
I picked a picture that was most similar to me. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, no further questions. So we done with this witness?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The defense would now like to call Detective River Foley to the stand. Right there. So could you please state your name for the record?
River Foley.
And what is your occupation?
I am a detective at the Harmony Police Department.
And how long have you worked as a law enforcement officer?
I have been a police officer for the past 24 years. I was hired in November of 1996.
And what experience did you gain in your time as an officer?
I attended state investigator training in 2000. I completed over 300 hours of training as an officer. I received the prestigious Master Evidence Technician Award in 2002, and I was eventually promoted to my current role of detective in May of 2003, and I was assigned to the homicide unit at that time.
And how many cases have you worked on as a detective?
I have worked as a detective on over 400 cases, serving as a lead detective in over a dozen.
And what additional training have you received in the field of criminal investigation?
I completed 4 months of advanced criminology training on forensic science with the FBI in 2005. I gained extensive knowledge in evidence handling and various types of evidence such as fingerprints, bloodstains, shoe prints, and fibers. I was also trained in crime scene photography and death investigation.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves to admit this witness as an expert in the field of forensic evidence and science, specifically including the areas of fingerprint, blood sample, shoe print, and fiber evidence due to their established specialized knowledge, skill, experience, training, and education in these fields. Any objections? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Objection. Sorry, I'm very not good at this. What is it? Party opponents.
Could you clarify?
Party opponents cannot be experts.
Could you please state the rule where party opponents can't be experts?
Probably not. Hold on, let me check.
And I'd also like to contest that Detective River Foley is not a party opponent. They simply work for the Harmony Police Department and are not the prosecutor or the state or the defendant in this case.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not good at this.
I actually have no idea. I've never heard that a party opponent can't be an expert witness. So I have no idea. You might be right. So if you guys have the rule number, I would love to know that before Saturday.
Hold on, I'm trying to see if it's in any of these notes. Hey, London. Help.
Yeah.
So,
He's right there. Well, I don't want to. You don't have to work all the way down there. That's fine.
objected
But we'll be back.
to party opponent.
He's too far.
Yeah, they asked for the rule number, and I don't know what the rule number is.
Carson does.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure the rule number, but well.
Okay. Well. No, it's fine.
Thank you.
Are you going to allow me to have them testify their opinion as an expert, or do you want me? Do you want to question this further? Because I don't know. I don't know if they're. I don't know.
Let me ask.
You'll ask someone who knows more than me, or you.
Yeah, they'll know way more than me. London. So,
Can you call?
you want me to like let them?
Can't you call?
Yeah. No.
They can go ahead and be an expert.
Okay. I'm curious. I'll ask our attorney about that.
Okay,
Alright.
I'll mark it too to ask the answer too.
So how did you become familiar with the Hamea Robbins murder case?
I have been involved since the beginning. I was one of the officers that responded to the crime scene on the night of August 31st, 2019, around 8:30 p.m. The incident occurred on the corner of First and Green near a popular Harmony food truck location.
And what was the first thing you did at the scene?
I saw that Corey Abrams, owner-operator of one of the local food trucks, was still in the vicinity of the scene. I thought that he might have some valuable information, so I went to have a conversation with him first.
And what did you do after, or what did your conversation with Corey Abrams reveal?
Corey Abrams explained that he heard gunshots and then saw an individual fleeing the scene with a gun. He explained that he got a profile view of the suspect and a brief view of the suspect's face. While eyewitness accounts aren't always reliable, especially in adverse conditions, they can prove useful in crime investigation. I got a general description and noted Corey Abrams' account.
And what did you do after your conversation with Corey Abrams?
I spoke with one of the crime scene investigators and reviewed the evidence that had already been collected.
And what did you learn when you reviewed that evidence that had already been collected?
I learned that a partial fingerprint had been pulled from the victim's glasses. I knew from experience that this could prove useful. I also noted several shoe prints, blood stains, and fibers, all important pieces in solving this puzzle.
And what did you know about the timeline of that evidence you had collected?
It had been quite rainy in Harmony even well into the day of the crime. While rain often works against crime scene investigation, in this case, it helped. We had a high degree of confidence that all the physical evidence had been placed either shortly before or during the time of Hamaya's murder.
So what was the next step in the forensic process?
After all the evidence had been collected, it had to be processed by the lab. There was a lab backlog and the unfortunate timing of Labor Day, and the evidence was not processed until September 3rd.
And what did you learn after the evidence had been processed?
Some of the evidence didn't reveal any new information. However, the fingerprints proved to be vital. The fingerprint obtained from Hamaya's glasses was an arch type, the rarest type.
Your Honor, may the record reflect I am now presenting clean and unmarked copies of Exhibits D and E. Sorry, just a second here. Okay, so could you please turn your attention to Exhibit D? Are you familiar with this exhibit?
Yes, this is the analysis of the partial fingerprint that was pulled from Hamaya's glasses, comparing the print to the print on record for Micah Opese.
And what does this analysis show?
The analysis shows several points of match and a high confidence that the match belonged to Micah Opese. While this is important evidence, I wanted to continue reviewing all the other evidence before making any sudden conclusions.
And how did this affect your view of the case?
I was already familiar with Micah Opese. He had a history of trouble with the law. I had interviewed him after he had been involved in a forgery, and he had also been booked for possession of marijuana, which led to his fingerprint being inputted into our system.
Now, could you please turn your attention to Exhibit E? Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes. This is the photograph of a shoe print collected from the crime scene. It matched a size 9 high-top Converse sneaker.
And what other physical evidence did you review from the crime scene?
We also discovered a Taylor Stitch blue nylon bomber jacket, a fiber from that jacket.
Okay. And how did this evidence connect to the crime?
These items matched the description of the suspect identified by Corey Abrams. Additionally, another food truck owner confirmed that an individual wearing these clothing items had made a purchase at their food truck on the night of the murder. And most importantly, we were able to confirm that Micah was wearing a blue bomber jacket and Converse high-top sneakers on the night of the murder.
And how did you proceed after these revelations?
Micah was firmly a person of interest in the case at this point. However, I continued to do some more research on him, and I eventually brought him in for questioning.
And what did you learn about Micah Opese at this point?
Before the questioning, I did some research on his social media and his online presence, and I found some concerning posts. These went beyond the usual teenage angst. They were posts referencing betrayal and revenge.
Your Honors, may the record reflect I'm now presenting clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit B. Could you please turn your attention to Exhibit B here? Could you read the final 2 lines of Micah Opese's tweet from August 9th?
I'm not passive, just aggressive. Maybe it's time you get the message.
And how did this quote affect your investigation?
It appeared to me that Micah was trying to act tough, and it only elevated my suspicions.
So what did you learn during your questioning of Micah?
First, I focused on his whereabouts on the night of the murder. That's whenever I discovered that he was wearing clothing items that matched the description given by Corey Abrams.
And what else did you discover?
I later focused on Micah's relationship with Hamea. I learned that their relationship had become tense after some developments between Hamea and Scout Farrat whenever I talked to Kai Robbins, Hamea's mother.
And from your experience, how did this affect your perception of the case?
I have seen many cases involving love triangles and jealousy, so it certainly gave Mike a motive. Micah was a strong suspect in the case at this point. However, I continued to keep reviewing all the evidence. However, all the evidence pointed to him.
So what was your next step?
Since we had an eyewitness account, I wanted to see if he confirmed that Micah was the person he saw on the night of the murder. So I wanted to conduct a photo lineup. While a convention delayed our meeting by a couple days, I was eventually able to get him down to the station.
And how did you conduct this photo lineup?
I gathered 5 photos of individuals that matched the description given by Corey Abrams and asked him to identify the person he saw fleeing the scene.
And what was the result of this photo lineup?
Micah confirmed that, Corey Abrams identified Micah Opese as the person he saw on the night of the murder. I double checked with him and he confirmed that that was the person he saw.
And how did this identification affect the case?
While I did everything to make sure that Abrams was identifying the correct person, eyewitness accounts can be unreliable to an extent. In this circumstance, it only reinforced the fact that all the evidence pointed towards Micah as the killer.
So what happened next?
Considering all the evidence pointing towards Micah as the killer, Corey Abrams' identification supporting this conclusion, I obtained an arrest warrant and he was taken into custody. He was assigned a trial date and the standard prosecution procedures were followed.
And did anything significant happen after the arrest?
On October 6th, Corey Abrams contacted me and said he was unsure of his initial identification and of Micah Opese as the killer. In the interest of justice, I took note of this. However, I was not sure that it was more than an overreaction to some news feeds. Since I wanted Prosecutor Okafor to be prepared for the trial, I gave him this information and it was out of my hands.
So did you have any further experiences with this case?
I heard that Micah took a plea deal and I figured that was the end of it until I was informed that I'd be testifying here today.
So in your professional opinion, how important was the eyewitness testimony in this case?
Eyewitness testimony is always considered secondary evidence. However, in this case, it only reinforced the fact that all the evidence points towards Micah as the killer.
So in your opinion, what conclusions can be drawn from the physical evidence and what you gathered from your investigation, excluding the now uncertain testimony of Corey Abrams?
All the physical evidence points towards Micah Opese as the killer. He was present at the time and place of the murder, and he had motive. Without the eyewitness testimony, and from my experience, all the evidence overwhelmingly shows that Micah Opese killed Homea Robbins.
No further questions.
I can't hear her.
What?
Is she talking?
Oh, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Miss Foley. You were a detective on this case, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you've been a detective for 24 years, is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate.
And could you tell us a little bit about your training?
Yes, I attended state investigator training in 2000. I completed over 300 hours of training as a detective or as an officer. I received the prestigious Master Evidence Technician Award, and I completed 4 months of advanced criminology training on forensic science with the FBI in 2005.
Okay, so as a result to your 300 hours of training, you were in the Master's Evidence Technician Award in 2002, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And in 2005, you completed 4 more months of training, correct?
Yes.
So it would be accurate to say that you haven't received any relevant training for 16 years, is that correct?
I work every day as a detective, and I think I'm receiving training every time I take on a new case.
Good answer.
Do you think there have been any advances in technology in the last 16 years that makes your training outdated?
I wouldn't say my training is outdated. I continue to work every single day on the same cases and new cases, and I think that I am fully trained.
Okay. So you said you have investigated over 400 cases in that 24-year span, right?
Yes, and I served as a lead detective on over a dozen of those cases.
So, since you don't have a specific number for over a dozen, would it be fair to say that that number would be somewhere between 16 to about 20, maybe?
That's possible. There's not a specific number.
Okay. So, it is fair to say that you were a lead detective between 3% to about maybe 4.5% of the time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. At the crime scene, you talked to someone who you thought would be an eyewitness, right?
Yes, I spoke with Corey Abrams.
And you were able to obtain a general description of what the person was wearing, right?
Yes.
But isn't it true that the witness told you that they didn't get a great look at this person?
He explained that he got a profile view and a brief view of the suspect's face. He was also able to tell me the type of clothing that he was wearing.
Could you tell the court what evidence was collected?
Yes, there were several fingerprints that were collected. There was a partial fingerprint that was pulled from Hamea's glasses. There was a clothing fiber that matched a blue nylon fiber, and there were several shoe prints matching a size 9 high top Converse sneaker.
And you are confident that this evidence that you collected is accurate, right?
Yes.
And the only reason that you're confident that this evidence is accurate is because of the rain, right?
The rain gave us a good idea of when the evidence was placed.
Okay. Isn't it true that you previously stated that there were numerous prints found at the scene of the crime?
Yes.
And did you look for and question anyone else whose prints were identified?
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Did you look for and question anybody else whose prints were identified?
Micah Opese was the only person's prints who were identified.
And Micah's print was an arch print, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And an arch print is the rarest type of fingerprint.
Yes.
Did you interview anybody else who had an arch print in Harmony?
All the evidence pointed towards Micah, so at this time we only focused on Micah's print. His was the one that came up in our system.
So just to clarify, you didn't interview anybody else who had an arch print in Harmony?
That is correct.
So you just decided that the person with the arch print was the person who murdered Halmea?
No, all the other evidence, as I said, pointed towards Micah as the killer in the case.
Okay. It is fair to say that a Converse is a pretty popular shoe in Harmony, isn't it?
I would say so. It's a pretty popular shoe everywhere.
And you found the other prints on the scene that were not Micah Opase's, right?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. You found other fingerprints on the scene that were not Micah Opase's, right?
We did find other prints, yes.
But you didn't check to see if any of those other people wore a size 9 Converse, did you?
The only print that we found a high degree match with was the one that matched Micah Opese. So no.
Did you interview anyone else as a suspect?
No, there was nobody else that had evidence that pointed towards them.
So you decided that this shoe print had to have been Micah's?
It was confirmed by multiple sources that Micah was wearing a size 9 high top Converse sneaker.
And just to clarify, you didn't interview any other suspects for this crime?
Objection, or asked and answered.
What was the objection to?
Asked and answered. You've asked that question, I think, 3 times now.
No, I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, I think it's clear.
Okay. Your Honors, may I present my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Can.
I'm going to present to you Exhibit B. I'll look sideways. Hold on. There we go. Can you guys see that all right?
We can see your Zoom screen. Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. We're good. Okay. Okay, Daniel Budke will be sharing my screen because apparently I'm having
Okay.
difficulties with that. Okay. So, in Exhibit B, you are aware that these posts were song lyrics, right?
Yes.
And you are aware that Micah Opace's profile picture is sheet music, right?
Yes.
Objection
So-
relevance.
Well, since it's relevant because it's evidence.
Well, I'm not questioning that these tweets are evidence, but I'm asking how Micah Opace's profile picture is relevant to determining, is relevant to examining the evidence of this murder.
It's a foundation for what this evidence is going to be showing.
Okay, just continue.
So, it is fair to say that it isn't a surprise that a teenager who is into music posts song lyrics when he's upset, is it?
Well, the song lyrics that he posted could be because if he was upset, but it could also be because he was feeling betrayal and revenge.
You did interview Micah, didn't you?
Yes.
And isn't it true that in that interview, Micah mentioned that they gave Helme a hug on the night that they met up?
He explained that they were working on trying to fix their friendship, and they met near the Harmony food truck location.
And before they departed, they hugged, right?
Yes.
And it is well within the realm of possibilities that the clothing fibers that were found as evidence could have been transferred by that hug, right?
It also could have been transferred whenever he was committing a murder.
Moving on. You interviewed Corey Abrams, correct?
Yes.
And Abrams didn't come in right away, right?
No, he was at a convention and it delayed our meeting by a couple days.
But once Abrams returned from their convention, they came to the police station, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you conducted a photo lineup?
Yes.
And then you got a warrant for Micah's arrest.
Can you say that again? I couldn't hear you, sorry.
After your interview with Corey, then you got a warrant for Micah's arrest.
That is correct, yes.
And Corey Abrams called you and told you they had identified the wrong person, right?
He told me that he was unsure of his initial identification.
And you took note of this, right?
Yes.
And you decided to tell Okafor when you saw them in court for a different case.
Yes, I wanted him to be prepared for the trial.
And you decided to tell Okafor about Abrams while they were busy in court with a different case, right?
He took note of concerns and it was out of my hands.
I'll think further.
So how often do you work as a detective?
All the time.
So how much experience do you have in new, even if technology changes, how much experience do you have with new investigative techniques and technology?
I would say I have very much experience.
And about the print, the only, how many matches did you find from the prints you collected from the scene?
The fingerprint,
Yes, you
7.
collected multiple prints. How many matches did you find?
7 points a match.
How many individuals matching the fingerprint?
Oh, just one.
And who was that?
Micah Opace.
No further questions.
Okay. I'm going to skip the recross.
Okay. No. Where's the other segments? We're slow. We got it. At this time, the state would now like to call Miss Kai Robbins to the stand. Is Madison alive?
Hey,
There she is. Okay. So could you please state your name for the record?
my name is Kai Robbins.
And how did you know the defendant, Micah Opace?
He was the monster that was convicted of killing my child, Hamea Robbins.
Of course. And you have my condolences. How well did you and Hamea get along?
We got along really well. Well, she talked to me about everything. from boy problems to what would have been her incredible future.
And how involved were you in Hamea's social life?
Well, I was very involved. Her friends were always over at the house, and she would tell me about everything.
And how well did you know her friends?
I knew them pretty well, especially Micah and Scout, and I would definitely say that Scout was the better of the two.
So what was your relationship with the defendant, Micah Opusay?
He was friends with my daughter, and I knew him pretty well from being over at my house so often from chaperoning various school field trips.
And how did you feel about Micah Opusay?
I always thought that he was a troublemaker, and he was no good for my Hamea.
Why is that?
Well, I'd observed too many instances of him being shady. Once on a field trip, he forged his parents' signature right in front of me, and when I went to call his parents, they'd given me a fake number. And when he was younger, he was even arrested for drug possession and for forging a fake ID. He's nothing but trouble.
And could you tell us what eventually happened between Micah and Hamea?
Of course. One night, Micah and Scout were over at the house, and I was sitting in the kitchen, and I heard a loud thump in the other room, and Micah shouted, "You're gonna pay for treating me like this," and then stormed out.
So do you know what might have caused such an outburst?
Definitely. I think that once Hamea and Scout started dating, Micah was angry and jealous.
Objections, lack of personal knowledge. Kai cannot testify as to a certain way that Micah would have been feeling, as there's no way to have any recollection of that.
May I respond? Kai, in this instance, already established that they had a lot of knowledge about their daughter's social life, and in this instance, they were present at the time of this outburst, so they would definitely be able to explain why what they knew about the outburst at the time.
May I respond?
You may.
Kai was testifying as to how Micah Opusay would have felt in that exact moment, and there is absolutely no way for her to tell or know for sure at all how Micah Opusay felt in that moment.
May I respond? Considering her daughter was involved in this outburst, I'm sure she was aware of what caused it. I don't know.
You can continue, but
Okay, yeah, we'll see. We'll be prepared for that. Thank you. So just ask again. Do you know what might have caused such an outburst?
I think once definitely. Hamea and Scout had started dating, and Micah was very angry and jealous, and because I'm pretty sure that he had a crush on Hamea for a long time.
And can you please try to give us your account of the night of Hamea's murder?
I can try. It was a normal day, and Scout and Hamea were over at the house, and they wanted some food. And Hamea went to get some food at a food truck nearby. Hamea was taking much longer than usual to get back, and I asked Scout if he'd heard anything. And he immediately started crying. He told me that Micah had been sending her mean texts, and I made him show me them. Scout then told me that Hamea planned to meet Micah at the food truck.
Your Honor, may the record reflect I am now presenting a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit A. Do you recognize this exhibit?
It's the text that Scout showed me.
And can you tell me what is, and can you please just read them to us?
Super cool that you're spending so much time with Scout. You two are really perfect for each other. You're both liars and backstabbers, so it's really great you found each other. Just do me a favor and keep my name out of your mouth from now on. I hope you both get the karma you deserve.
And as a mother, how did those texts make you feel?
I felt horribly upset, firstly, at the fact that Micah had the gall to say such things to my baby. I'm also upset that Hamea did not tell me about this. If she had, things might have played out differently.
And what was the aftermath of that night?
I gave the police everything that I could, and they assured me that with what I had provided and the evidence that they had, that Micah was the murderer.
No further questions.
can we stop screen sharing?
Oh, sorry.
Well, actually,
Sorry.
okay. You can still pull up the thing, right, Daniel? Okay. Okay. Good evening, Miss Robbins. You said that you were best friends with Hamea, is that right?
Absolutely.
You said Haumea told you everything, didn't you?
Yes.
And you said that you and Haumea never argued or fought. Is that right? I'm sorry.
No, didn't.
Well, did you and Haumea have a good relationship?
We always had a good relationship. She told me everything about her life.
So probably not very much arguing or fighting if you had a good relationship. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. You said that you weren't involved in, or you said that you were very involved in Haumea's life. Is that right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, isn't it true that you put a tracker app on Haumea's phone?
I just wanted to have the best interest in my child and wanted to make sure that she was safe, and it obviously didn't work.
So you did have a tracker app on Haumea's phone.
Yes.
But you said that Haumea was a great kid and you guys were really close.
Yes.
So it's fair to say that you were always watching Haumea, isn't it?
I wasn't always checking the tracker app just because I had it on her phone.
But you still had it just to track and
Just to
see
make
where she was, correct?
Just to make sure that my child was safe, yes.
Okay, you encouraged Haumea to bring friends over, including Micah, is that right?
That's right. I wanted to make sure that she still had her friendships regardless of how I felt.
Even though you called Micah a monster, didn't you?
I did because only after the fact that he was convicted of killing my child.
But you stated that Micah had always been a troublemaker, is that right?
Micah made a lot of mistakes, yes.
And as you said, ever since elementary school, Micah had been a troublemaker, right?
Right.
So you still allowed Haumea and Micah to hang out, is that right?
I allowed Haumea and Micah to hang out because at my own household because I had control of what was happening and I didn't want to be in control of his relationships despite how I felt about Micah.
So just to be clear, you didn't want to control Haumea's life, yet you had control at your household when Haumea's friends were over there?
I didn't want to control his life. I actually never stated that I didn't want to control his life. I always just wanted to make sure that
Miss Robbins, you just stated that you had control over what was going on at your house with
In my
when
household.
Haumea had their friends over. Yes. So you
Yes.
were controlling that aspect of Haumea's life. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. You said that you were concerned about Micah signing his own permission slip, correct?
Correct.
And you were furious when Micah played a prank on you and gave you a pizza place phone number instead of his parents. Is that right?
That's right.
But you had met Micah's parents at a PTA meeting, hadn't you?
Yes.
So why didn't you get Micah's parents' number then?
Why did I didn't need to get their phone number at that point in time.
So just to be clear, you let Micah and Haumea hang out. They were friends and you knew about it, yet you did not have Micah's parents' phone numbers.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I didn't feel that I needed to have them.
Objection on irrelevance.
This is completely irrelevant as it was talked about or it had already been established that Kai did not have Micah's parents' phone number. We're just touching base on the fact on why she didn't have.
It's not clear how that's relevant to determining whether Micah Opusay killed Haumea Robbins and whether his plea should be withdrawn.
Actually, we're trying to prove whether or not the plea should be withdrawn, not whether or not Micah killed Haumea. So even then, that still doesn't.
I'm just confused on how the evidence, how this line of questioning.
I'll just rephrase it then, but we had already talked about it in previous questions, so I think it's still relevant.
I just want to know how. I'm not. This is an objection over how. What is how is it relevant?
Well, I have to continue questioning to get to that point.
I'll listen. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and re-ask that question, Miss Robbins. You said that okay. So why didn't you get Micah's parents' number then?
Because I didn't feel that I needed to have it.
Okay. Yeah, you let the two of them hang out on a daily basis, even though you thought Micah was a monster.
At my household, and I didn't call him a monster until after he was convicted of killing my child.
And as we already established, you knew that or thought that he was a troublemaker, correct? Okay, thank you. So, you said that the messages that Micah sent Haumea were mean and also threatening, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to present my screen to this witness. The text message exhibit, I think it's A. Let the record reflect, I am showing a clean and unmarked copy of Exhibit A. Okay, I don't know how we're gonna actually do this year, but okay. I would like to read the first text to you if you don't mind, Miss Robbins. This text here says, super cool that you're spending so much time with Scout. You two are really perfect for each other, heart emoji. Is that what that text reads?
Correct.
That text doesn't sound mean or threatening, does it?
It seemed pretty sarcastic after reading the text messages afterwards.
So, but it's still not mean or threatening. Is that right?
I believe that it was in mean and threatening language after reading the text.
I'm not asking what you believe because that proves nothing in court today. I'm just asking whether or not there are actually any threatening words in that text message.
Not in this text message, but the text messages after, yes.
Okay, well, let's continue looking at these text messages. The second text reads, "You're both liars and backstabbers, so it's really great you found each other." Nothing threatening there still, am I right?
Well, he actually did call my child a liar and a backstabber, so I do believe
That is
that
still
that's
not
threatening.
threatening, Miss Robbins, is it?
It's actually very mean, yes.
It may be mean, but it is not threatening. Is that right?
Not this particular text messages, but there
Thank
is
you.
threatening
Well,
messages
let's
in the
look at
text
the
messages
third text.
afterwards.
Let's look at the third text, dissect it, see if we can find anything threatening. Third text reads, "Just do me a favor and keep my name out of your mouth from now on." Is that right?
Yes,
So it is pretty obvious here that Micah was upset that Haumea was probably talking about Micah. Is that right?
correct.
Okay, and then the last text says, "I hope you both get the karma you deserve," peace sign, heart emoji. Does that have any threatening text insinuating that Micah will do anything to hurt Haumea?
I believe it does.
And there is nothing here that gives you proper foundation to believe that way.
Actually, yes, there is. She
There-
actually said that he hopes that she gets the karma that she deserves, and then she ended up dying. My child.
It's possible to conclude that this was a normal teenage argument between Haumea and Micah. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say so. No.
Well, you may not say so, but there is still nothing threatening, no actual words, nothing including the words murder or fighting or getting hurt in these text messages. Is that right?
I believe that there are threatening.
Robbins, you are
text
not
messages.
answering my question. I am asking you if there are any threatening or harmful words in these.
Objection on her badgering the witness. You allow my witness to answer the question before she says she isn't answering it.
But she's not answering it, so.
You didn't allow her to speak.
Okay, I'll let you continue speaking.
I believe that by him saying that he hopes that she gets the karma that she deserves, that these are threatening. Yes.
Okay, well, Miss Robbins, you are not an expert witness today in court, so you cannot testify as to what somebody was actually meaning. Let's go ahead and move on. So isn't it true that you are biased towards Micah and it really doesn't matter what he says or does, nothing will change your mind about him?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yes. Isn't it true that you are biased towards Micah and it really doesn't matter what he says or does, nothing will change your mind?
That's not true. If I believe that Micah could actually redeem himself if he had done things that proved that he was a good kid, but he never proved that.
So just to be clear, your mind cannot change on Micah now?
No, it couldn't. Especially
thank
after he's
you.
convicted of killing my child.
Okay, thank you. And Haumea came to talk to you about dating Scout, and you encouraged her to do this. Is that right?
Yes. Scout was a great kid.
Okay, Haumea also said she had a feeling that Micah had a crush on her.
Yes.
And you said that it concerned you that Micah had a crush on Haumea, correct?
Yes.
But it also made you feel better because you didn't think Haumea reciprocated these feelings.
Correct.
Okay, you said that you heard Micah yell, "You're going to pay for treating me like this." Is that right?
Yes.
And Haumea told you when Micah stormed out that they felt excluded and they were acting overly dramatic about it. Is that right?
Yes.
And you said that that was music to your ears. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You also said you thought good riddance when they stormed out.
Well, yes, because I thought that Micah was being completely ridiculous to my child, and he said before he stormed out were horrible.
Okay, thank you. And you also said that you wrote to the other parents on the forum about how happy you were that Micah was gone?
Yes, because Micah was terrible to
I'm
my
not
child.
asking why, I am just asking for a yes or no answer.
I was just explaining my situation.
I didn't ask for you to explain your situation, Miss Robbins. I was just asking for a direct answer.
And I gave it to you, yes.
Yes, thank you. You weren't worried about Haumea going to the food truck that late at night because you had a tracker app on her phone, is that right?
Right. And it didn't work.
I'm sorry, the tracker app didn't work?
No, I thought that it was going to work as in keeping my child safe, but it didn't.
Oh, okay, thank you. You said you asked Scout at 8:40 if they knew where Haumea was, isn't that correct? And Scout immediately started crying?
Yes.
And that's a rather odd response, isn't it?
Yes.
And Scout said they were trying to call Haumea and she wouldn't answer, and that's why they were crying. Is that right? I'm sorry, could you give me a yes or no answer, Miss Robbins?
Yes,
And Haumea shared the text she received from Micah with Scout and not you, correct?
that's correct. She always had my best interest at heart and just didn't want to worry me.
Oh, okay. But yeah, you say that you and Haumea were close and best friends and told each other everything, correct?
Yes, but she did always have my best interest, and I'm sure she just didn't want to worry me.
Okay, thank you. And if you were so close and best friends and everything you said you were, why were you tracking Haumea's every move?
I was tracking Hame to make sure that she would stay safe.
But yet the tracker app initially did not end up working, correct?
No, it didn't.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
So could you just tell us again, why did you install the tracker app on Haumea's phone?
To keep my child safe.
And reviewing those texts, what was your first reaction when you saw those texts?
I thought they were very mean, and I was very startled to see that Micah would say such horrible things to my child.
And in retrospect, how do you view those texts now?
I understand why she didn't show them to me, but I do wish that she would have.
No further questions, Your Honor.
I'll go ahead and recross. Miss Robbins, we took a look at the text messages, didn't we?
Yes,
And it was established that there was actually nothing along the lines of murder or harm in those text messages. Is that right? Although
Not
you
murder.
thought so, there was nothing specifically stated in those text messages. Is that right?
other than karma.
But that's still not anything about fighting, harm, or murder. Is that right?
I believe that it was threatening, but not about murder, no.
Okay, so you're still not answering my question. There was nothing about murder or harming one another in those text messages. Is that right?
No, just about getting karma.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Well, time for closing. Cool. Good job, Madison. Good job, London. It was a good cross.
Sweet. Do you want me to do my closing?
I'm ready when you are.
Okay. All right. May it please the court, opposing counsel. Your honors, my co-counsel stood before you at the beginning of this hearing and explained to you that this is a case about a manifest injustice caused by the state of Buckeye when Prosecutor Justice Okafor intentionally withheld evidence from Micah Opusay. On October 15th, 2019, Micah Opusay accepted a plea deal under the assumption that an eyewitness was going to testify that they were seen fleeing the scene of where a murder occurred. Feeling overwhelmed and trapped by this mistaken eyewitness identification, Micah felt they had no choice to accept. However, the state intentionally withheld knowledge that the eyewitness, Corey Abrams, had recanted their eyewitness identification to Detective River Foley. Instead of disclosing this information to the defense, Prosecutor Justice Okafor simply offered a new and lesser plea deal to get rid of the case. Your honors, the case law outlined in Brady v. Maryland states that a person's due process is violated when a prosecutor fails to turn over material evidence within its possession that is favorable to the defense. The Buckeye Rules of Criminal Procedure state that in order to withdraw a guilty plea, a manifest injustice must occur. A manifest injustice can occur when a defendant does not enter their plea knowingly, voluntarily, or intelligently. The withholding of key information regarding the recantation of the only eyewitness to this case did not allow Micah to make their plea knowingly, voluntarily, or intelligently. You first heard from Corey Abrams, a food truck owner and sole eyewitness to this case, who misidentified Micah as the perpetrator. Corey Abrams explained the 5-photo lineup that they observed with Detective River Foley. It was not the night of the murder, but 10 days later that Detective Foley had them come in and did not try to contact anyone else within that time period. Corey went on to explain that the picture they chose ultimately was brighter than the rest in the photo lineup. Corey also explained to you that they mentioned to Detective River Foley that they were not 100% positive the person they chose was the person they had seen fleeing the scene of where the crime occurred. It wasn't until months later that Corey realized that they made a mistake in their identification. Once they realized this, they immediately called Detective River Foley. Detective River Foley assured them of their decision, and then Corey Abrams never heard from the state again. You then heard from private investigator Charlie Nguyen, a seasoned private investigator and former police officer and expert witness to this case. Charlie Nguyen told you about how problematic eyewitness identifications can be, especially when the witness is identifying someone that they only saw briefly and from a distance. She told you about the concern she has for 5-pack photo lineups, as they can often overwhelm and pressure someone into choosing or misidentifying a perpetrator. She told you about the fingerprint that was found on the victim's glasses, and how there were only 7 points out of a typical 12 needed to match the print to an individual. Ms. Nguyen also went on to explain that there was a size 9 Converse shoe print, both very popular amongst the city of Harmony. Finally, private investigator Nguyen examined a nylon fiber that was found at the scene and determined that a nylon fiber is one of the most common types of fabric and is found in a broad range of clothing and accessory items. It is quite reasonable to conclude that the recantation of this identification would have had a high probability of changing a jury's view in this case. Micah pled guilty based on the evidence that had been requested and disclosed by the state, but it turns out that Micah was making a judgment call on an incomplete record as a result of the state's failure to disclose material and favorable evidence. This court should grant Micah's motion to withdraw their guilty plea because Corey Abrams' statement recanting their identification of Micah to Detective Foley constitutes exculpatory evidence within the state's control, which, if disclosed, had a reasonable probability of changing the outcome of the case. Had Micah known about this recantation, there is a reasonable probability that he would have rejected the prosecutor's final plea deal. As such, we respectfully move this court to grant Micah Opusay's motion to withdraw their guilty plea and correct the manifest injustice that has occurred. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize our timekeeper had left, so there were no time cues. So sorry about that. But I'll go ahead. Your Honors, may it please the court and opposing counsel. The state respectfully requests the denial of defendant's motion for a plea withdrawal. The defendant, Micah Opusay, knowingly and voluntarily pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter and the killing of Hamea Robbins. In this case, justice was served and must be upheld. The defendant's constitutional right to due process under the 5th and 14th Amendments was not violated. Defendant is making their motion to withdraw under Rule 32.1, which requires the defendant to prove that a manifest injustice has occurred, which will permit a withdrawal of their guilty plea. In fact, but the defendant has not clearly and convincingly shown that such a manifest injustice has occurred. In fact, we have shown that that any allegations of a manifest injustice are unfounded. In fact, the real injustice in this case would be allowing the killer of Hamea Robbins to be set free. The defendant alleges that Prosecutor Justice Okafor's failure to disclose the reservations of Corey Abrams rises to a due process violation under Brady v. Maryland. However, even assuming that the evidence withheld falls under Brady, which the state firmly disputes, in Campbell v. Marshall, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals determined the question presented in the instant case is not so much whether the particular conduct complained of violated Brady, but instead whether under such circumstances petitioner's guilty plea was intelligently and voluntarily made with the advice of competent counsel. Again, Campbell was a case specifically about evidence not disclosed in plea bargaining. In comparison to this case, unlike Brady, which was made in the circumstance of a fair trial, not fair plea negotiations. In this case, there was no evidence that the defendant's plea was not knowing or voluntary. Further, the Supreme Court held in Ruiz v. United States that the Constitution does not require the government to disclose material impeachment evidence prior to entering a plea agreement with a criminal defendant. The protections of the Constitution, Brady, and Giglio are protections meant to ensure a fair trial, but a guilty plea, like the one Micah Opusay made, is a waiver of the right to such a fair trial. Ruiz makes this distinction clear, and
the prosecution had no duty to turn over Brady evidence in the plea bargaining phase. Justice was served, and it must be upheld. Furthermore, Corey Abrams' reservations do not even qualify as evidence that violates Brady because the evidence was immaterial. In Kyles v. Whitley, the Supreme Court clearly established that a Brady violation requires that the favorable evidence could reasonably be taken to put the whole case in such a different light as to undermine the confidence in the verdict. The testimony presented here today makes it clear that the mere reservations of Corey Abrams do not rise to that standard. First, we called Detective River Foley to show that the physical evidence found at the crime scene clearly implicates Micah Opasay as the killer of Hamea Robbins. She explained, using her expert knowledge, that the analysis of the evidence clearly establishes Micah Opasay's guilt. The experienced Detective Foley showed that one eyewitness's reservations do not put the whole case in such a different light as required by Kyles. The emotional testimony of Kai Robbins, the mother of the victim, showed that the defendant had motive for killing Hamea and threatened Hamea previously before meeting the victim at the place of her murder. With or without the eyewitness account of Corey Abrams, it is clear that the defendant killed Hamea Robbins. Today, the defense handsomely compensated and called Charlie Nguyen in an attempt to discredit the evidence that clearly implicates the defendant. However, Nguyen had no direct knowledge of the investigation and could not exonerate the defendant. The defense also called Corey Abrams to try and discredit his original eyewitness identification of the defendant. Even though Abrams only had second thoughts after seeing produced media segments, his testimony today is largely irrelevant because we have shown that the immateriality of his identification and the lack of Brady or Giglio due process implications. The defendant has already admitted to killing Hamea Robbins and is just now trying to desperately reverse their plea. However, the defense cannot prove the necessary manifest injustice because justice was served and it must be upheld. The state therefore respectfully requests the denial of defendant's motion for withdrawal of their guilty plea. So, if you want to, you can take whatever time to get your rebuttal ready and do a rebuttal if you'd like. What's my time?
4:37.
Ooh, I kind of think the rebuttals are over.
No, you're good.
Who's close? It's all right. I'm just trying to guess the way.
I only have 2 seconds to spare.
I've had like 3 sentences just on why. Because I thought it was going over. Because I spent way too much time on this first page.
All right, I'm ready for the rebuttal.
Go ahead. We'll keep time for you. We'll post the time here. It's 2 minutes. I'll give you a minute and 30, just so you know.
Okay. Am I good?
Yeah, go.
May it please the court, opposing counsel. Your honors, the state of Buckeye has stood before you today and attempted to convince you that the withholding of critical eyewitness recantation was within their right under the laws of the state of Buckeye. However, what they don't want you to focus on is the fact that it was that very eyewitness's misidentification of Micah Opasay that led to the state of Buckeye charging my client for the murder of Hamea Robbins. That up until the state had that critical piece of evidence within its possession, not a single person had been charged for this crime. That's how critical this piece of evidence was, your honors. So critical that without it, the state of Buckeye refused to charge anyone for this horrible crime. Yet now the state of Buckeye wants you to believe that this eyewitness recanting their misidentification of Micah Opasay prior to trial was no big deal. That the state had no obligation to turn this over to Micah and their attorney, yet under the court's analysis in Brady, this evidence was undoubtedly in the state's possession, and this recantation was so critical that it certainly would have had a reasonable probability of leading to a not guilty verdict. That, your honors, is a violation of my client's rights under the 14th Amendment. As such, by the state of Buckeye withholding this critical piece of evidence, my client did not enter their guilty plea knowingly, my client did not enter their guilty plea voluntarily, and my client did not enter their plea intelligently. And as a result, under the Buckeye Rules of Criminal Procedure, a manifest injustice has occurred. Your honors, my co-counsel and I ask you to do what the laws of the great state of Buckeye command. Find that a manifest injustice occurred by the state's blatant withholding of material exculpatory evidence, and grant our motion to withdraw Micah Opasay's guilty plea. Thank you.
Okay. You were at 1 minute, 45 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap. Good trial. Sad we don't get to know who won or anything, but
Was fun. You guys ready for trial number 2? We're going late tonight.
Of course, they didn't know we were doing it.
That's sad. That's annoying. I'm going
I
to
don't
go
know,
yellow
you didn't
quarter.
tell us.
I'm going to go yellow quarter. I'll be back.
We gotta figure that out.
I'm gonna cry.
I'm starved to death.
I wanna go.
My price is just birthday.
I thought they were done.
No, they're not, they were behind us.
They're behind us?
Oh
My gosh. Well, it's not fair if you guys don't get a good one.
Bye, everyone. Good luck this year.
Oh, see ya. They did it.
Good luck.
You too.
Justin,
What?
what are we doing?
I don't know. Patience.
Trying to figure out what Corey wants us to do.
Oh, okay.
Answer the dang phone.
Oh, what? Sprint. Don't break anything. We don't have time for all this.
We do this tomorrow if we don't get it done now.
I should have timed him. I'm not sure why we didn't start
At like 3.
before 5.
I don't know. I don't like 13 cutting.
Hi, Madison. It's Daisy.
Hi, Daisy.
Hello, you did good.
Yeah, you did good. That was
Thank you. I rolled my eyes at her like 4 times.
Well, literally everything she said, I'm like, why are you saying those words?
I was like, you're wrong. Like, I just wanted to be like, stop.
She took everything out of context.
Do you
Oh my
think
gosh.
do you think we should use the text messages? Cause I don't have a lot of high questions, I'm not gonna lie.
Are you asking me? Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was good, except the fact that she just kept telling me what she wanted me to say. Like, she's like, so there's no ending, and I was like, yes, there is. And then she kept asking, and I'm like, yes, there is.
Yeah, I think if it were me, I would just ask, do you see anything threatening here? Right, so that I wouldn't go for every text, but, yeah.
I wouldn't say every witness is gonna like say that those messages were threatening, but
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
she was on my nerves, so I just.
Yeah.
I want to go, but I don't know what, like, they're behind us, so I doubt Porter wants us to get one in and they don't want to get theirs in.
I get passed out at 10 o'clock every night, I don't know.
So far it's taken 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm close at like 9:30.
Let's say we get done, we get started in like 15-ish minutes.
So like 9:45. Yeah. They probably won't get out of here until like 10, and they're behind us.
They're behind
I'm
us.
gonna go.
And they have little freshies that can't drive.
Um,
So are we doing another trial?
No, Preston's going to talk to Porter right now.
Okay.
We're in the office.
If Preston influences him,
Oh, there you go.
We're gonna
please don't tell me to do what we're doing it. Please don't tell me we're doing it.
You want to do it?
No, I know, but like, we're gonna get out here till like 10, I don't know what's gonna happen.
What do you gotta be?
What did you say?
At home.
What did Porter
Doing
say?
what?